I've been stoked to know Javin for so many years, from all the way back in Permaculture Voices two, I believe, and he's helped me get through so many periods of decision making. And it's been so grateful to know Javin and see his work and have his work impact me and impact so many people, including Zach, including Water Stories, including all like just tons of people in the field of ecology and regenerative agriculture. So I'm super grateful to have Javin on to share what he's doing, his art form, and his science of holistic decision making. So, Zach, why don't you introduce Javin from your context, and we'll get started here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, really great to have Javin here on the webinar. One of my really close friends and an amazing person at helping see an outside perspective and poke giant holes that you didn't even know were there. They're just like a bubble that just needs to pop sometimes. And I think he does a really good job of seeing people's uh, a core self in a way, and also really helping them guide that through making good decisions, which is so important. There's all these different pieces of the puzzle, but I think one of the things that has really helped me uh, throughout everything is making good decisions on projects. I think if I have one skill, that's the thing, is split second decision making on projects. And this is something that if you make good decisions, you're going to have great success in life. And if you make bad decisions, you're going to be regretting them and cursing them and wondering why you did this to yourself. And I think Javin does a really amazing job. He also has a whole online platform with all sorts of amazing courses, really worth checking out. I'm going to put it in the chat here. We'll keep dropping chat links in the chat as we go. But I think Javin really excels when it comes to understanding how to make good decisions based in values. And with that, we're excited to have him here for our Water Stories webinar.
Raleigh and Zach, thank you so much. That's a very generous introduction, and I'll take it. Chief Bubble Popper. Sure. Yeah, I've popped a fair number of people's bubbles, my own included. So thank you, gentlemen. Such a pleasure to be here. Such a pleasure to have worked with you over a great number of years. I think we're definitely over the 5, and in some situations, the 10-year mark. So real pleasure. Hello, everybody. My name is Javan Bernakevitch, and I'm really excited to share with you something that is very close to my heart. So, the process of life design is in the word. Life design. We're designing our lives, and we're doing so in such a way that we are embodying a lot of the ecological principles and practices and first principles that Zach uses in water stories, that Raleigh uses with soil and composting. And that's what's so beautiful about being involved in ecology in whatever which way you are, if it's in design or homesteading or restoration or food growing or native restoration. All of that aspect brings you closer to the ecology that evolved us. And by understanding those principles, we can apply them for ourselves. So today I'm going to walk you through a process and conversation that is near and dear to my heart, this idea of values-based decision making. And I hope you enjoy. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A. If you want to chat with each other, definitely use the chat. And as Zach said, if you have questions towards the end, we can bring everybody into a little bit of speaking about this conversation as well. So let's start with Albert. Imagination is more important than knowledge. So arguably one of the smartest people that reached a global audience. His approach and focus wasn't just necessarily the work and the science. It was about having imagination. It was about the ability to create a vessel in which he could fill or float in. It was about the ability to see beyond where he was and what he was doing. And connected with this, one of my all-time favorite historical figures, Buckminster Fuller, the best way to predict the future is to design it. If we want to change the way we look at water, we actively have to design a different future. We have to train people in the ways of working with a new water paradigm. We have to create water retention landscapes. If we want to create a world where we appreciate soil, we need to be able to design that by training people how to look at soil properly and interact with it, grow microorganisms, understand the strata within the soil. This is all about understanding the bigger picture. So we start with these two quotes because it helps to frame us in a long-term perspective, and one that is based not necessarily in all the logical and linear, but a little bit of the imaginative aspects and the emotional aspects. So quick check in. You're here for you. So focus. Be here for you. We're going to start to practice this approach of values-based decision making by focusing your attention. So dedicate your time. If you're here live, if you're coming to us on the recording, just dedicate your time. I know you got 100 other tabs up. Just close them. Turn off notifications. Make the presentation full screen. Get comfortable. It's a webinar. I don't see you. You want to lay down on the ground, if you want to chill out, please do. As I tell all students and all clients, the way we take in information is not necessarily the way that we would do it naturally, because we've been taught by route to do it a certain way. So if you just want to listen for this and come back later on and take notes, that's lovely. Be here for yourself. We'll talk a little bit about external and internal motivations. Most times when we are externally motivated, we'll eventually burn out. But if we're internally motivated, like both Zach and Raleigh are with their respective work and their vocations, their callings, you can kind of go forever. And so just check in on the intention of why you're here. And to that point, let's go back to the chat. Let me know why you're here. You told me where you're from, but why is it you came to this webinar and this topic? I want everybody to do a little mic check in the chat and let me know. Last two pieces, law of 2 feet. Be here for yourself. If this isn't for you, you got lots of things to do in your day, leave, but I'm likely going to challenge you, as Zach talked about. I pop a lot of bubbles. So chances are I'm going to rub you the wrong way in a few aspects here, because I'm going to challenge you to potentially become more than who you are. And so be aware that the law of 2 feet exists, but if you're feeling some resistance, maybe ask of it, what is this about? What am I doing here? Why am I feeling frustrated? Because that can lead you to the X. The X marks the spot, and that's where the gold is. Wherever we have personal resistance, that's where the next step of gold is for us. While back, I learned how to become a fire lighter, working with prescription fire and anthropological fire with the Yurok tribe in Northwestern California. And before I became a fire lighter, I had to become a firefighter. And so I learned how to become a firefighter. I took courses, and I was so amazed that in firefighting, something that you would think is super macho and just like get in there and do it, they always started each class with this idea of you can come at any education with 3 mindsets: a closed mindset, open mindset, or a growth mindset. Closed, I don't want to learn anything. Open, I'm open to learning something. Growth, I'm open to giving up that with which I value most, my sense of being right, to learn something new. My invitation to you during the time we have together today is to come with a growth mindset, to come with the idea that there's probably going to be something you're going to have to give up today to be open to what I'm going to discuss and share with you. Quick little summary of me. So since 2009, I've consulted and designed and installed landscapes worldwide, helping to support or install over 134,000 acres. I've worked with basic survey all the way up to drone survey, creating accurate digital maps for individuals to where, like in this property, the water drainage lines that we showed up on the computer were 2 inches off of where they were in real life. I've worked on 6,500 hectare farms in India, planning and designing. I've worked and built a number of different types of water retention landscapes. I've worked at small and large scale. I've worked with homesteaders, corporations, individuals, communities, small, tiny house communities. And it's been one of my great joys and what brought me into this work originally. Originally, I came in through taking a permaculture design course, which led me to becoming a regenerative land consultant, designer, and installer through my company, All Points Design. I've also grown and sold produce. I've been a farmer at a very small micro scale, working in both vegetables and fruits and also microgreens. Love doing that work. I don't think I'd ever run a microgreens business again, but I enjoyed the heck out of it when I was learning. Luckily, I've given up my love for Crocs, so you don't have to worry about that. I've also taught online and in person over 73 permaculture design courses, the flagship way of learning about permaculture. Regenerative design science created by David Holmgren and Bill Mollison. I've taught and created over 90 different courses in the last 15 years, taught 3,000 students. And because of my experience now, I've had a lot of different organizations, including university, ask me to come in and take a look at their material because I have so much experience. I created a educational platform called Regenerative Living Online, which since 2019 has offered over 35 different courses ranging from rainwater harvesting to low tech erosion control, syntropic agroforestry. We're currently just running a biochar course now and a art and science of living soils, and have loved working with people internationally. I also have a soft spot for herbal medicinals. And so this is one of my favorite plants. Over the last couple of years, I've grown and sold herbal tinctures. Spilanthes is one of my all-time favorite. And I also ran a small nursery working with specific nut varieties coming out of the Gallatley Nut Farm out of Kelowna in British Columbia, Canada, where I was originally born in Canada. I've also, through regenerative business design, mentored and coached students and clients, 73 different businesses and 320 different clients over the last 15 years, and worked in this very interesting branch of applied ecology called life design. Now, life design has a number of different conversations. The first and foremost is values-based decision making, helping us to make better decisions. As Alan Savory, who I based a lot of my work on, likes to say, the number one issue we have in our lifetime is that humans have made very bad decisions. I also help people with regenerative business design and also help them with interpersonal aspects, resistance, elements that come up through a process called voice dialogue. And you can find out more about that on allpointsdesign.ca if you're curious, in both the portfolio, the life, and the land tabs up at the top. Also, if you're interested in my work, you want to know more, at allpointsdesign.ca at the bottom, there's going to be a newsletter you can sign up for all the new offerings that come up. So let's start at the beginning. The world has changed. It's always changing. Entropy is always happening. And because entropy is always happening, taking things from high order to low order, buildings that are beautifully built down through the streams and out to the ocean, that means if we ever stand still, the best we can hope for is stagnation, but we usually end up backsliding. So unless we're into a place of growth, we'll usually stagnate, stalled, or be stuck, which means we have to be actively aware of where that is happening to us. No more so than in the world of attention. Attention, in terms of our current world, has become the number one form of currency, to the point to where attention equals our future. Where we put our attention becomes our future. I don't know if anybody else wants to admit this, but have you ever had your attention stolen from you, or you actively gave it away? I know I have, many times, and many times throughout a week. But it's about refocusing your attention, bringing your attention back to that which is your highest calling, to that which is your essence expressed, to that which is of the highest value to others, without, of course, becoming a martyr and becoming burnt out, as I'm sure a number of us can say we have. But it's about realizing that our attention equals our future, and thus attention should be one of our major focuses. That means you have to be clear about yourself, your life, your family, and your business. You have to be clear on what you're working towards. You have to be clear about what you're not working towards. The number of colleagues, the number of folks who are well known with big followings in this world of ecological design and application who've reached out to me because they're burnt out, they've gone too far, too fast, was one of the most surprising things to me when I went into this work of life design. Almost everyone has dealt with a point of saying yes too much, not saying no enough, giving themselves over to this feeling that they have to do everything for the world. And if they don't, the world will collapse. Hint, the world is fine without us and will shrug us off very, very easily and is trying. So it's about being clear about the intentions, clear about the attention, or where the tension is within one's life. And if you don't do that, your capacity, your power, your ability to create the future of your dreams for yourself, your family, your business, that horsepower will be led away by somebody else. So if you don't guard the power you have to create your future, somebody else will gingerly come along and take it. Each of us has a horse and a cart. Each of us has our horsepower and the ability to pull our dreams and our loves throughout. That horse is your capacity, your ability to create change in this world. The cart is the dreams, the hopes, the aspirations. And for many at this point in time in life, there's a feeling like there's no way to do that because of externalized forces. Well, there's three spheres of influence. There's my business, your business, and nature and God's business. I can only control one of those spheres. I can only control my business. I can't control your business, and I can't control nature or God's business. And if I try, I suffer, but only 100% of the time. That's the beautiful contribution of Byron Katie. If we step outside of what we can control, we suffer every time. I cannot control what you do. I cannot control what others do. I cannot control what the weather does, although we're trying in small and large ways. And I cannot control what source, creator, God, however it is you frame that aspect of faith. But I can control myself, which means the one thing I can do is make sure that my horse isn't taken by somebody else to go and draw their dreams towards their ends. The best thing anybody can do is bring a bunch of people together and take all of that horsepower and use it for their dream, shackle it to their dream. And unless you're clear that their dream is your dream, you've given up your power. You've given up your ability to make change in this world to somebody else. And that's a problem because, as has been often uttered, we need people who come alive in this world. We need people who are passionate in this world. We need people who are saying, this is what I want to do. This is the change I want to make. And come hell or high water, I will make it happen. And they find people like Zach has done with Water Stories to bring people together, say, yeah, I am interested in creating a different story around water. I am different and being an advocate about that or a practitioner in that. It's an important aspect to change because, again, we all have that horse and cart. That never goes away. Just because you don't see it, don't think about it, don't worry about it, doesn't mean it's not true. And our lives, just like motorcycles or hang gliders or paragliders, are manifestation machines. Where we look, we go. If you've ever ridden a motorcycle or a bicycle, wherever you look, there's your heads turning, there's your hands turning, and there you're going. So if you're looking towards destruction, disaster, despair, you'll go there. If you're looking towards hope, if you're looking towards individuals like Zach, like Raleigh, like yourselves, the people who are doing this great work, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, you will continually move yourself in that direction. This is called that attuned attention flywheel. A flywheel, a lot of people don't know what a flywheel anymore is because we've lost a lot of our mechanical knowledge, but a flywheel is the ability to put a little bit more energy at the beginning of the start of a mechanization process, a kinesthetic mechanization process, and then you have to put less energy in to keep that moving. And the attention flywheel goes like this, where your attention goes, your energy flows. Where your energy flows, life grows, and where your life grows, future is created. And around and around and around it goes. And it doesn't care specifically where your attention goes. If you sit there and you look at everything that's wrong in the world, you'll see more of it. And that's what you'll see, and that's what you'll create in your life. If you focus on somebody else's future, that's where your attention will go. That's the future you'll create. But if you focus on you, what's important to you, the values you want to hold for the future, and the decisions that will get you there, you will slowly but surely, just like a flywheel, move yourself towards that direction. And for people I've worked with, like Zach and Raleigh and others, that's been the process about helping them to hone in their focus, hone in their attention, put a little bit of the blinders on every once in a while, because there's a lot out there, to really focus on that. This is a tool of sovereignty. I call it the map of attention. It was inspired by my late colleague, Dan Palmer. And the conversation here is we wake up and our attention can be in 1,000 places. After almost every interaction we have with the world, our attention can be in 1,000 places. But by beginning to direct just 10%, 5%, 1% of our attention inwardly and going, what's important to me now? What's the next thing that's important to me? We slowly move that attention to those elements. And slowly but surely we move and we change course. Now, again, if you only do this once every once in a while, you know how it goes. If a ship's going off course, if finally you do this every year, there's a lot of distance to come back to. But if you make a habit of doing this routinely, who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? How can I bring myself back to course? Slowly but surely, you make more progress over time. The problem is that when we're born, society, our ancestors, corporate capitalistic consumerism, Western civilization has a hand on the back of our neck firmly focused towards what they want us to see. And nobody taught us this, nobody told us this, but it's the reality. And if we don't take the time to go, wait a second, what do I actually believe about ecology, life, my own potential, where I want to go? That direction is just the same as people taking your horsepower and attaching it to their cart. This is really well explained in the Greek myth of the bed of Procrustes. And Procrustes was an innkeeper, a way stop. People would come, he would give them revelries, they would have a wonderful night, and then he would take them up to bed. And inevitably, he would lead them either to a bed that was too small or too large. And he would either hack off their limbs to make them fit, or he would stretch them out. This is a metaphor. This is, in many ways, a reality in our current lives. Each of us, and you see it in children, each of us has an essence that needs to be expressed. Each of us has an essence that needs to be out there in the world. And we only have two needs when we're young: a need to belong and a need to express. And we'll give up the need to express for a sense of belonging 9 days out of 8. Why? Well, we're biologically incapable of taking care of ourselves. So we learn to be pleasers when we start off. We learn to take care of everybody else's needs. We turn to what can we do for you? And in most civilizations that are indigenous and have to rely on the members of their tribe, they need to go through a rite of passage. They need to stand on their own 2 feet and prove to themselves they're initiated to be brought back into the tribe, which is why most of these rites were fatalistic. But we don't do that. And that's why values-based decision-making and other tools like it are so important to bring us back to ourselves. John Hollis has this beautiful conversation called The Appointment of the Soul, that after attending to so many people in Western civilization, and because we're pleasing in nature, at some point, our soul becomes so offended with what we're doing, which is usually the status quo. And I talk to these people all the time. I had 3 good fit calls with folks this week who were trying to redirect their lives, work on their new businesses, and they just couldn't do the work that they were doing anymore because the appointment of one's soul said to them, if we don't do what we were meant to do, there's no reason to do anything else. And this is where we see mental health issues. This is where we see anxiety, depression, despair. So the appointment of our soul is important to understand what our soul is calling us into and to meet and appoint ourselves within that soul's calling. And this brought me to one of the biggest revelations in my entire life. If you don't design your life, someone else will design it for you and probably already has for their benefit, not for yours. This is an important phrase to burn into one's memory, to have as a bass string to pluck that creates a resonance throughout what we do. If you don't design your life, someone else will design it for you. This means everything about all aspects of your life, your belief systems about everything: money, family, sex, work, who we are as a species. Jeff Lawton within the permaculture world has classically brought people into his sphere by saying we can be just as positive as we are negative. That one phrase changed everybody to go, oh, you're right. We do have capacity. We do have potential. But this is where it comes down to you in your life, how you operate and why. Second question for everybody, or third, I don't know how many questions we're at. Into the chat. Do you actively, intentionally guard your attention and your dreams? And if so, how? So into the chat. First question, do you currently guard your attention and your dreams intentionally? Not like, well, I kind of, sort of. No. Yes or no? Do you guard your attention and dreams? Yes or no? And if so, how do you do it? And take a moment to look at what everybody has to say about this. Take a look to see how the conversation is playing out, how other people do this or don't do this. For the most part, most people don't. Most people try to. Most people want to. But if you do, say how, because that helps to support the conversation. That helps to support the attention. Do you limit what you look at? Do you limit what you ingest? I'm a practitioner of the meditation process called Vipassana. And within Vipassana, you are very aware of what you ingest mentally, emotionally, and physically. I think generally everybody in this call is probably pretty aware about what they ingest physically, or at least to a certain point. But mentally, do you guard what your eyes see all the time? Are you aware of what voices you allow into your mind? Are you aware of the people you're speaking to and how they speak to you? This is where it's so important to be aware of staying on course, on being present, to be able to guard all of what you do and all of who you are. For me, it's been values-based decision-making. The idea that if I forecast into the future what I want, who I want to be, what my projects want to be, who I want to be with my partner, and what are the values I need to hold to become that person, to change my identity, that becomes my way marker. And most recently, I had a number of tests. I had a number of blood tests that showed me that the genetic predisposition of my ancestors is starting to express within me. And I'm moving towards, regardless of diet, regardless of all the work I do, I'm moving towards a place of being insulin resistant. Already am. And if I don't take the steps to work on that, if I don't turn up the dial on my discipline, I'm going to move towards a direction I don't want to be in. And so a values-based decision-making conversation here is I'm holding the value of I'm disciplined. I'm holding the value of my body matters. I'm holding on to the value of my cognition matters. And this moves me towards my goal. Values-based decision-making comes from the great work of Alan Savory in holistic management and holistic decision-making, and my late colleague Dan Palmer of Very Edible Gardens. They both laid the groundwork within this to be understood within a larger framework, to apply in a larger framework. And the circular nature of this work is exceptional. So I got into holistic management. I saw Savory's work. I read his book. I was like, wow, he's a hard person to read. He doesn't really make it easy. Dan comes along. He simplifies holistic decision-making, shares it widely. I get into it. I then am asked to teach for Darren Doherty and the Regrarians platform in their very first Rex, which is their online Regrarians platform training. Dan sees me on that call, reaches out and says, hey man, we should be friends. I'm like, Dan, you inspired me to do this work. And this is what I'm talking about. There's a flywheel of intention, but there's also a flywheel of moving towards what you want. And it's unfortunate that we lost Dan a couple of years ago, and I think about him almost every day. One of the things that Dan loved about my take on this is that I really focus on this idea of a ruthless clarity of vision that originally was told to me by Lisa Helps, who became the mayor of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And having a ruthless clarity of vision means that you are in, not out. It's kind of like you can't kind of be pregnant. You're pregnant or you're not pregnant. And you're either in your ruthless clarity of vision or you are not. You're either working towards what you want or you are not. I'm either taking care of my diet and taking care of my health or I am not. There's no gray area there. And this is where holding yourself well, guarding your attention, working in a way that really holds you up, moves the needle forward like nothing else. The core of values-based decision-making is focusing on states of being. And corporate consumer capitalism really wants us to be interested in buy the thing and you'll feel a certain way. It almost never happens. Almost never happens that you get something and all of a sudden you're happy. Most times you reach the plateau, you get the thing you're working on, and you're overwhelmed. There's feeling a sense of hollowness because you've achieved something that you thought for a long time was important but wasn't. And this is where the idea of having something larger than oneself, of having a value of oneself, of having a big mission that you might never accomplish in the world, moves us towards what we want, because every day we get to work towards it. If there's a static goal, which corporate consumer capitalism loves, you achieve it, and then you need to go find another one. It's an addictive nature that pushes us all to want more and more and more, and never sit with the place of enough, and really loving that place of enough. So simplified, before we get into the nitty-gritty about values-based decision-making is a process by where you pick a focus. You pick a whole, W-H-O-L-E, in your life. Life, family, business, project, doesn't matter. Of course, the smaller it is, the more of your effort goes into it. And so the further it can move forward. Then you envision the whole's desired future. So what do I want for my life? What do I want for my business? What do I want for my partnership? What do I want for my project? And I just recently ran 2 workshops, Envision Business and Envision Life, in December. They're on regenerativliving.online if you're keen. This is where I start with everybody. We start with Envision process. And a lot of people, their imagination has atrophied. Their ability to envision a better future is atrophied due to them not guarding their attention and allowing stories and conversations to come into them without practicing that process of imagination. So once we envision what the future looks like, then we clarify, who am I in that future? What am I doing? How am I feeling? And one of the individuals on the Envision Business workshop, a really close personal friend of mine, she came, Kakasimu, and she's a Métis woman up in Alberta. And the vision she had was she was a person who's working mostly on her land. She's not going and delivering all of these cultural teachings of her nation to other people, but she lives on her land. And that gave her the value. She clarified the value of, I teach on my land from my land. And that became the filter to filter out all of the decisions for this year. Anybody who comes to her, am I teaching from my land? And if not, what's the return? So it became this one decision that makes 1,000 decisions. So you use that filter to filter daily actions and decisions. You're basically living your values to change who you are, to become your future. You don't arrive in your future, you become your future. Dan had this beautiful way of looking at it. He would say, how was your hand designed? And people would look at him like, what do you mean? He goes, well, how was your hand designed? And everyone goes, well, it wasn't, it was evolved. And this is where design and evolution take place together. So we have designs for the future, but we keep our eyes on the horizon, feeling the ground beneath us instead of always looking down or always looking up, because life happens. We have winds that blow us, we trip and fall. That's part of it. And so we're actively becoming our future. We don't arrive at our future, we become it. It goes back to that beautiful saying, human beings are works in progress that mistakenly feel we're finished. We never end. For those that are interested in these type of tools and work, there's a process and a conversation about becoming sovereign that I love. The sovereigns of old, the kings and queens, they were exalted above everyone. But one of the things that was important is that they were creators and the created. They were the creators and created by what they did. And we can become sovereign in and of ourselves. We don't have to take on the mantle of being kings and queens, but being sovereign, the idea that we create our surroundings, that's a really important piece within life design. And part of that, one of the tools of sovereignty is understanding that there's an equation of change. Change is 100%, from 0 to 100. And the first 10% is awareness. I need to know where I'm going. I need to know what I'm not to be able to take the steps to get there. And it's a prerequisite. If you don't have that, you can't move forward. If you don't understand where you're going, if you don't understand that I need to walk over there, you can't get over there. Then there's tools and techniques. And for me, values-based decision-making, voice dialogue, regenerative business design, all of those have been tools I used. And if you look at 100%, we're only 40. The rest of it is application. It's doing the work. So you can always live in the palaces of your mind, the theory of your mind. But like Zach talks about in Water Stories, you have to go out there and do the work. This is what we talk about in permaculture so much. It's great to think and it's great to create, but if you don't go out, as my food forestry mentor used to say, you don't take a stick, dig a stick, and plant a living stick, a tree, you haven't done much of anything. But that equation helps us to understand the prerequisites to get to where we're going, which leads us to our first case study. So Takota Coen, amazing regenerative farmer up in Alberta, Coen Family Farms, building your homestead, has done incredible work. And Takota loved holistic management. He was so into it. And he took these two separate courses. He was facilitated by all these different instructors. And while he did that work, he was still confused. He was like, but I really want to, this feels important, but I want to make it mine. And he knew that I was doing this work. So he reached out to me. We chatted. If I work one-on-one with people, it's usually 6 to 7 hours. And through that, we were able to develop his values, which we call holistic context, and get him very clear on what he wanted. So he started to make really good decisions. And then a little while later, he reached out, as a lot of people do, after we worked together. And he's like, hey, I got a big decision I got to talk to you about. Fantastic. He's like, listen, I have an opportunity to buy back like the piece of land, the initial piece of land that got sold off when my family was building out their farm. And I'm trying to figure it through, man. I just don't quite get it. I was like, cool, man, let's sit down. Let's look through it. So we did. We went through all the testing questions that are a part of values-based decision-making. And we came to realize that what he wanted to do is he wanted to grow and travel and really share what he had learned, because he has such a great growth mindset, such an open mindset that's so important. And he realized that if he was to take on $500,000 of debt, he'd be facilitating that debt for 35 years. It would change him. He would go back to being a full-time production farmer, and he won't be able to spread and continue to work on some of the perennial systems he had created. So over, again, a very short conversation, these single decision tests are pretty beautiful. He was able to make the decision that no, this isn't for me. If I do this, I'm going to push myself into a place that I don't want to create. And because of that, he was able to establish further his family farm. He was able to write a book. He was able to create a new company called Building Your Homestead and help a tremendous amount of people. So values-based decision making for him, and he said this to me many times, it's like it was a shield against the biases of others. It was a shield of you got to go do that. You got to make that happen. And this idea of having shields and abilities to protect ourselves is important. Years ago, I read this wonderful book called The 5 Secrets You Must Discover Before You Die by John Izzo, and he talked about a test they ran. They had these two groups of people that came in, and they said, great, we're going to split you up. One group have like a SMART goal, specific, measurable, actionable, all the rest of it. The other group just have a value. So generally, goals are always around the same thing: money, health, family, friendship, relationships, expression. And so specifically in the exercise conversation, one group had like, I'm going to work out 3 times a week at 2 p.m. And the other group was, I'm a person that moves. They went off for 3 months. They came back. One had a goal, one had a value. And sure enough, the ones that had the value, a little piece of paper in their pocket, they pulled it out every day. They looked at it. They're like, oh, right, I move. I got to move. It became who they were. And there was a 3x change between what they did in terms of their progress. And this is a really important piece because within values-based decision-making, we use this conversation called a daily statement of reality. It basically hits the thing that is the weakest link within your life. And so Andrew Milson, a friend, a colleague, he reached out, as a lot of friends do, and they say, hey, I'm having some problems. He's got 500,000 subs on YouTube. He's getting quite popular and a lot of notoriety. He's like, I'm flooded by requests. I don't know what to do with this. I was like, cool, man. Like, let's take a look at systems. Let's take a look at values. So we did. We created some great systems to filter certain conversations to where they needed to go. We then went deeper. We took a look at how he looked at his work. And we found that there was this aspect of, oh, I have to get back to everybody. And the person he wanted to become was incompatible with his current behavior. So he started to adopt this value of I'm a person who doesn't respond to everyone. And immediately the weight lifted. Immediately he was willing to say, oh, other people can respond to those people. And there's just some requests that are already answered by my, I don't know if he has hundreds now, but I'm going to say hundreds of videos or the courses he runs through Oregon State University. But he was able to put everyone into the places that he was supposed to be and live. Another colleague of mine years ago, was an edible landscape manager, came in. They were working in a big non-for-profit office, and they had a lot of young folk who were in this office. She was in her 50s, and they would always come up asking her questions that they could have figured out herself. So eventually she came up with this daily statement of purpose, which I love, which was, damn the zombies, my brains are for me. And this is what's great about values-based decision-making. It can be about you. It can be about what's important to you. It can be in your own words, and it needs to be. And she said to me after about a week of doing this, she's like, you did more for me with this one saying and helping me clarify it than about 10 years of therapy did. Because she, like all of us, have this pleasing nature, as we talked about before. And this helped her to reclaim space to hold that boundary. That became her shield. I don't respond to everybody, and damn the zombies. Again, couples love doing this work because they get to be on the same page. For so long, couples think they're together, think they're doing the work, and then all of a sudden you sit them down and say, great, what are your common values? A little bit of friction, a little bit of smoke. But eventually they get to a place of what is common. And you don't have to have all common values with your partner, but in your partnership, in your family, if you do, you're pulling together and you communicate differently. This was the fun thing about Evie and Bart over in Belgium. Within just the first few sessions, they're like, we're communicating differently because we're actually thinking about what we're saying to each other. We're thinking about what's important. It's such a big conversation to finally say, what's this for you? And what's this about me? So commonly I get this call, and I'm sure Zach gets them as well. People watch Biggest Little Farm. They watch Andrew's videos. They watch Jeff Lawton. They're like, oh my God, we're a couple. We want to become farmers. We want to do all the things. Let's do the thing. Let's have this goal of being this certain type of way. And this is very much our society. Goals over quality of life. Goals first, quality of life second. Let's have the farm. Let's have the barn. Let's make it red. That's the most important thing. But when you ask them, when you actually dive into it, when you ask why multiple times, this Kaizen school of asking why that came out of Japan, they started to say things like, well, I want a clean living, and I want to be close to nature, and I want to work with our hands. I want to raise our family safe. I want to be of service and value. I want to know our food. Now, if anyone's ever farmed or homestead before, you know that the weight of the farm, the weight of the work can really affect and squeeze out a lot of those elements of quality of life that you're seeking for, to the point to where many times the farm can completely obliterate what we thought it was going to bring us. So values-based decision making flips it. It says, let's put quality of life first. Let's hold those values first. Clean living, work with our hands, close to nature. And now let's use it to test each of these different elements that might be coming to us. And the hundreds of farmers I've worked with, this is, for a lot of them, the work that they loved, or the hardest work on the farm, as Takota likes to call it, thinking. And they get to make decisions on what they want on their property for who they are as people. This also goes into the intrinsic characteristics of a landscape and what a landscape can support, but it produces that level of awareness. So years ago, Robert and Stacy reached out. They wanted me to take a look at their land. And I don't just design a garden or a pond. I work in holistic regenerative landscape design. I take a look at everything. And so looking at their landscape, looking what they wanted, I suggested we work with values-based decision-making. They make a holistic context, which is their values. And when I finish my conceptual work, they basically have a land manual. They have all of the observations and conversations about how their land works with all the different cycles, the mineral cycle, the water cycle, the carbon cycle. And them in particular, they were able to clarify, like, oh, wait a second, we don't actually want a campground. No, actually, our land is actually really suited to grazing. And it allowed them to seek out different types of farmers they wanted to bring on, because they wanted to be a farm incubator. So what is this holistic context I've been talking about this whole time? It includes three elements: resources, an inventory of what you have around you. And a lot of people do this and are like, oh my God, I didn't know how wealthy I was, because I was going with this design around the world that wealth is only money. It takes a look at visions and values. What do we want to be? And then it has filtering questions. So resources, present; values and vision, future; and then filtering questions. So when we inventory our resources, we're taking a look through the lens of the 8 forms of capital created by Ethan Rowland and Gregory Landua. And we're really taking a look at who are the decision makers within this whole, who are the veto decision makers, who have influence, who have consideration. And then we take a look at spiritual capital. What's the intention behind what we do? What's our impulse? What gets us out of bed? Social capital, who's around us. Intellectual capital, what do we know still? Not necessarily what we've done, but what do we know personally? Material capital, what do we have around us? Financial capital, what's the money under the mattress and hidden in the walls? Experiential capital, what have we done, or the people that are involved in this, what have we done? Cultural capital, the stories we tell. And then living capital, what is the ecology around us? So we do an inventory of that. And that then brings us to values. So we take a look at statements of purpose, why get out of bed; quality of life statements, who am I, what am I; behaviors and systems, what am I creating, or how I create that quality of life. And then finally, how will I know that those things are true? So you can look at it a different way. Know what you want and what you have to do to get what you want, and how you'll know it's true that you've arrived. And then finally, we take a look at filtering questions. So we have a number of filtering questions that take a look at what's the root cause of the problem. Does this create a weak link, or address a weak link socially, financially, biologically? Does this decision move us in the right direction? If we've got 2 options, what's the gross profit analysis? What's the energy source or use of the work we're doing? And I've got a great example with Raleigh a little bit later. That one question just cracked a decision for him. We've got future indicators. How do we know we're going to get there? And then gut check. We're still emotional beings. We're still herd animals. We still have that intelligence within our gut. And a lot of people come to me for just a single decision. You might know this guy, handsome bloke. Years ago, Zach reached out and he said, hey man, I got a really cool opportunity, but I need to talk to you about it. I was like, okay. He goes, I think I've got this offer to potentially pick up this piece of land, and it's a really good price. It's down in Latin America. I'm really keen on it. I don't really know what to do. And we hadn't developed his whole value set yet. He's a busy guy, that Zach. Hard to pin him down. And I said, okay, Zach, well, 2 questions for you. One, what do you want currently in your life more than anything? And what do you not want? And he explained to me, I'm looking for community, but I'm looking to expand my work. I kind of want like a centerpiece, but I don't necessarily want to be dowed to a place that's going to take up a whole lot of time and money and energy. I was like, cool. So we just asked him questions over 15 minutes. That was it. And by the end of it, I said, how do you feel now? And I'll never forget this. And he goes, I started this off thinking this was the best idea, but like the logic and the linearity of this really helped me to clarify what it was. So it's like the logical, lubricated the emotional, and the emotional lubricated the logical. It's one of these beautiful moments of just going, wow, the people I work with, they take this so much further. But again, it was that aspect of going through all of those elements, going through those decisions and really asking the question. Another great case study. This was a teacher, Nikki, who reached out, who had said yes to everybody for her entire life. And she had this moment, this epiphany of going, wait a second, the value of I matter. That was the one value that unlocked her whole conversation. She goes, I matter. Basically opened her up to everything she ever wanted because she wasn't saying yes to everybody anymore. And she kept on being like, why wasn't I taught this in kindergarten? This feels like the most important thing I could have learned. So as we're going through this process, I realized as I was learning values or holistic management, there needed to be more stickmen. I needed to understand this, like, who am I and how am I? So my resources, my values and visions is me. And then life continues to throw elements at me. I know this is me and probably most of you because we're wearing work boots. And here comes an idea. And so basically, we can run through the system, we can run through a decision, and sometimes it's just root cause. Just like there's a single question of like, does this decision address the root cause of what I'm working at? And so Takota, again, halfway through our work together, he goes, I've got a decision to test. I'm like, great. I want to buy a drone. I was like, okay. So the decision is, should I buy a drone? Yeah, great. Root cause question. What's the root cause that this question seeks to solve? And he goes, it seeks to solve that I don't have a drone. And our minds will make anything true if we want it. It's incredible. I said, no, Takota, what are you trying to do with the drone? Well, I want to do aerial imagery of my client's property so I have a sense of before, beginning, and after, and help them for designing and all the rest of it. I said, cool. So the problem is you don't have this imagery, right? That's the problem. Great. Awesome. Well, you live in Alberta. There's this thing called Vault Atlas. They do orthomosaics almost every year with high LiDAR, so you get great digital imagery. And it's less money. You don't have to go out and do the work, and it's delivered right to your inbox. He goes, oh, yeah. Now, he eventually bought a drone because it was a good idea for his own site and to monitor his cows. But it's one of those elements, just a single question can diffuse an idea. And then we have ideas, decisions, and actions that we go through an entire conversation like Zach's, where we go through the whole piece and we're like, oh yeah, none of this makes sense. It makes sense because it's a cool opportunity and it's a neat place, but it doesn't necessarily check all the boxes. And then sometimes we go through an entire decision, we go through the whole thing and it actually passes. So recently Raleigh reached out. We've been working together for a long time in regenerative business design and also values-based decision-making. And he had this great opportunity to create a composting workshop, like an inclusive, fantastic, incredible experience. And I talked to a bunch of people who were there and they're all like, that was one of the best workshops I've ever been. And as we were going through this decision, we got to this one element, this energy source and use question. And it was this idea of like, how much time do you have between now and the workshop to do the work? How will the energy of your life force be applied to this? And what will it produce for you? And basically, because he's working for Water Stories, he's working for himself, he's creating his own life. He was like, well, it's like 25% of my time, but it moves everything. Every single needle gets moved in the right direction. And so sure enough, this was a total win from a decision-making process. And I remember the next time we chatted, he's like, I've never felt so clear on a decision, which is a beautiful state of being. And sure enough, it was an incredible conversation. He made connections with other individuals, starting and applying himself in different ways, creating new business opportunities. And this is why decision-making can be such an incredible tool in your toolbox. Greg Hancock, a sheep breeder out of Alberta who went to New Zealand and back again, was having to deal with this tractor. And there was just this feeling like, if something's broken on the farm, I must fix it. Even if there's nothing doing with it, even if there's other opportunities, even if it's an asset that's currently deteriorating. And so again, through that decision-making process, we just came to the conversation of, wow, this is not something I need to fix. This is actually something that needs to get off the farm. And I actually need to rent my neighbor's tractor because I only use it a few times a month. So as we close out here, there's a couple of takeaways I want to give folks. And at the end here, I also want to give some time for Zach or Raleigh to speak to some of the decisions I talked about, so that way they can add to this. But here's some takeaways. Attention is our/your most valuable currency. Spend it wisely. Be very, very conscientious who you give your attention to and how they apply it. I was just talking with a colleague of mine where we were talking about individuals who talk a good game, but they don't do any of the work they're doing. Marketing experts that will teach you marketing, but they've never taken a company to great heights through their marketing efforts. They just talk about it. You have to be conscientious about where you put your attention, who you give it to, because it's what moves you towards your future. Remember, if you don't design your life, it'll be designed for you, likely already has, and for somebody else's benefit, not yours. And to slowly and surely develop a ruthless clarity of vision of your desired future. You can choose one area of your life, just one area of like, this is what I want to be true about who I am in the future. And if you hold that, you slowly move your needle in that way. Remember to guard your attention and values closely. So being conscientious of them, coming to them throughout the year is really important. I come back to my values now 4 times a year, both solstices, both equinoxes. And it's that piece of like moving away, coming together, moving away, coming together, because we forget. Humans forget. It happens a lot. And so a lot of this is about the remembrance, the remembering of who we want to be and bringing it into our present state. In life design, I talk a lot about, I could boil it down to just doing good favors to your future self, eating well this day, getting yourself out, making sure you only do the things that are important. So that way, future Javin, tomorrow Javin's like, I'm so glad you did that webinar. I'm so glad you took all that time to practice. I feel like that worked really well. And so sometimes that guarding of attention and values is about doing favors for yourself. Again, seek help when you need to. This is the piece. We all need help. We all have to learn ourselves, but we don't have to do it alone. So reaching out for good advice has been one of the most important things I've ever done. I've done it with Zach. I've done it with Raleigh. I've done it with so many people. Like when I'm at a loss, I reach out. And most importantly, design your life intentionally. Take the time to go, where am I? Where do I want to be? How do I get there? So how do you engage with this? Just try it. Just think about where you want to be, hold a value, and hold it as something you come to daily. I worked with this great farm manager years ago who ended up calling me a life Sherpa when I asked why he came back with his then girlfriend to get themselves on the same page. And he goes, you just help me get to greater heights. You take our baggage, you help chart the path, and then you give our baggage back being like, I wouldn't carry this. Let's talk about getting rid of it. But he was brilliant because what he would do is he'd have this little Post-it note every day. He'd write that daily statement of reality, which was, I work for my family. It was very simple. And he would pull it out. And if you've ever worked farming, if you pull a piece of paper out of your pocket, it disintegrates in like the 4th time. And so he had to write it over and over every day. And by the end of the first week, he goes, I'm so much more aware that I'm working for my family and I'm not doing anything that I shouldn't be. It's incredible. So try it for yourself. See how it works for you. Don't take my word for it. I've got some videos on my YouTube channel at All Points Design. You can take an intro course I'm going to talk about here in a moment, or take a group course, which I'll talk about as well. We can work one-on-one together. People usually reach out, javin@allpointsdesign.ca, and we have a good fit call. We see if I'm a good fit for you and you're a good fit for me. And sometimes we do a single decision. Sometimes we do a whole context. And you can always learn about these other opportunities that are coming up at allpointsdesign.ca if you sign up for the newsletter at the bottom of the page. So the 2 opportunities that are coming up, if you're interested, again, make sure it's a good fit. This is not a hard pitch for me in any way, shape, or form. We've got the gentle art of joyful productivity. So this is an introduction to values-based decision-making specifically for and applied to productivity. So it's a great way to learn how to do this. And what we do is we develop a daily statement of reality, similar to what Andrew did and what the edible landscape manager did. And you basically over 4 sessions apply it. You get a test of what it's like. And so if you're interested in that, I'm going to put the link here in the chat. It's a pre-launch list. It's going to go out February 1st if folks are interested. And then I'm going to have a group, my very first online group course. I've only worked one-on-one with people for the last decade. It's going to be my first online group course. We're going to get together. We're going to be 6 months together so you can really apply what it is we're doing. Also, if you're interested in that Envision process, those are currently online. You can go to regenerativliving.online and you can go through the Envision business or the Envision life process. Both of those are totally available for you folks to do today. Folks, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to something that is so close to my heart. It's very much me expressing my essence and expressing what I think is so important. And for me, the purpose of life is to find your gifts, and the meaning of life is to give them in service of others. So I hope you've taken away one or two things that you can use in your life today. And I'm super open to questions and conversations. I'm going to pass it on over to Raleigh and Zach and see if they have anything they want to add to some of their decisions or the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Javin. Yeah, I could do a quick reflection on a decision that I made real quick. So basically, I was planning this big international retreat workshop called the Compost Academy Retreat. And at that point, I was weighing, it was like a ticking clock where I had 2 weeks to make a decision. Should I go for this? Where if I didn't hit this target, I could lose potentially $30,000. So it was this big decision. And I had to weigh the metrics of like, okay, what is the number I need to hit for this to be worth it? And it was like, okay, if I hit this minimum number, if I didn't hit this minimum number, what wouldn't be worth it? Okay, I only get a third of the signups, I lose $20,000. Not worth it. But I hit the minimum numbers for it to basically slightly do less than break even, it's still worth it because I made these materials for a future program and we could do some things on the back end and we still meet people. Great. And so that was like, I think I was gonna like I was pretty sure that I was gonna make that target. So it was kind of like a yes choice. And it ended up being like we exceeded that target. So it ended up being a big win. And that having that minimum, it was basically if I don't hit this minimum number, it was like 10 people, then I would pull out before the refund date of this workshop. It was a very clear number with a very clear date and being like, if you don't hit this number, you pull out of the workshop and you lose a few thousand, but you don't lose like 30,000. But if you get above that number, then go for it. Like go ahead with it. And so yeah, we hit that number and it was like a go ahead situation and it made it way less high stakes because of this decision. And I was super glad that I took the time with Javin to go over that decision.
And on my end, I'll say I it's amazing how much can become clear so quickly when the right questions and considerations are asked. I think humans, we like to think we're logical, but we are very much emotional beings. And sometimes you have to really pull your emotions out of it and evaluate things. And I mean, it was honestly quite shocking how over the course of 15 minutes it went from, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer, I'm going to do this, to this is a no-brainer, this is not going to help solve any of the issues that we just talked about in any way whatsoever. And in fact, it's going to make all sorts of other issues that are, adding further weak links to the equation. So it's really remarkable, I think, how hard it is to see those things from inside of it, and how easily someone like Javin can just crack that egg open to see, okay, what's actually inside of here, and what's the situation. Is this going to lead you where you're trying to go, or is it just a cool idea that you're really excited about? And we're so programmed and wired to kind of move in that direction. Um, so huge amount of gratitude for all of that. And I remember also, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago, working on a documentary, and Javin had the forethought to say, do you really want a documentary? Because it sounds like you should be making an online course in a community platform. And, lo and behold, we're all here as part of Water Stories today. So, um, yeah, I would just really highly recommend it. Even if you don't have a big decision, getting yourself aware and ready for this is going to really help you make good decisions and help you prevent bad decisions. So I can't speak highly enough of the courses that Javin does, the one-on-one work that he does. Really recommend it for everybody. And so that folks know, this session is recorded. You will get a replay afterwards. I see some questions in the chat here. Um, I think I'll do just a quick little run through for the course, and then we'll open it up to the question and answer. So if you guys want to get your questions queued up in your mind, we'll have some people raise their hands and ask questions with their voice. You can put them into the chat. You can put them into the Q&A, and we'll pick and choose from all of that. Um, Real quick before we go into that, I want to let you guys all know that right now we are in the middle of the launch for our Water Stories core course. It's our live offering each year. Um, this is really the training program that I developed to try and condense my whole journey into the quickest time period possible to make as many practitioners as possible. It was after Sep, said some nice things about me, but then said, but one of you is nothing. There needs to be hundreds or thousands. Millions would be better. We're starting to slowly accumulate that. We have all these excellent practitioners from all around the world, way more than is on the screen here. This is just some highlights. And so this is all really simple stuff that you guys can learn how to do. Everyone in this picture here from one of our in-person workshops is now doing this in some meaningful way in their life. So we have in-person training opportunities that are available after people have gone through the core course, which serves to bring everyone up to a base level of knowledge. We have a live 6-month experience, and that's starting at April 7th. And it's really amazing to see. I'm not going to go through all these different stories, but people are already having springs on their land, making this their full-time career, spreading this in their communities. There's really amazing people all around the world that are taking on water cycle restoration, whether as a professional, a steward, or an advocate in a meaningful way, getting clear on where they fit into the equation, getting the confidence to take the next step, teaching kids how to do these kinds of things, forming teams of people working together to restore their regions. And one of the things that I really love about the course is if you do the work in the course, you will get so busy doing this work that a lot of times people don't finish the certification right away because they gave the presentation that was required as part of the course. They now have a project that they're working on. And so it's really fun to see all the different people. We have students working for high-end luxury hotels, the finest wineries or in the world, or winemakers in the world. All sorts of different people are now really having lots of issues with water and needing to seek solutions. And so we have this self-paced and a live course, really amazing group of people in the live course every year. Javin joined us last year. This year we have David Spicer and Mark Leiber joining us. And so this is really the way to, move these skills and practices into your own hands, to gain them for yourselves and to bring water back to land. And so we have a special offer just for you guys on the webinar here. If you enter the promotion code VALUES at checkout, you'll get a $100 discount, and you'll also get our pre-launch special, which includes early access to our pond building master course, our spring tapping master course, and an Ask Me Anything session. You only have the next 24 hours because that special ended over a week ago. So we're extending it just for you guys here with the promotion code VALUES, which I'll put into the chat here. And yeah, now we want to hear from you guys. What questions do you have for Javin? And, I hope that you guys will all, in some sense, start embodying this very important stuff in your life. As soon as you do, you're going to immediately see the results, and it's going to become addictive, and you're going to keep doing it because it delivers such good results.
It's incredibly helpful. It's just the screening of life's most complex challenges and finding a way to deal with them. I couldn't recommend it enough. I mean, some of the greatest organizations in the world are doing this, and so it's not just one metric. They're like, let's support the needs of the team, let's support the needs of the ecology. It's not just one thing. It's everything together. Oh, now let's ask what's the website for that code? Boom, you got it. And yeah, the code is values. All right. Well, we got the chat box, and let's see this. If anyone wants to ask their question live, just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. But we also would love you to kind of do both. You could type your question in and then raise your hand, and then we can get to it live. All right.
We got
So
the first question from Rory about your offerings, Javin. Looking at the Envision Life, I think I posted a link from the one right before the new year, but could you explain how people can participate there? Because
Yeah.
he was saying it
So
looks like it took place on the 21st of December, but I think you have a another offering that I should have linked to.
yeah. So if you go there, basically there's some outdated information that's saying that it took place on in December, but all of the recordings are up and live and ready to go. So it's just that date is still up there, but that is the right link, Rory. So you've got it right. Oh,
Awesome. One question for you here, Javin. With time, values don't change, but circumstances change. How do you adapt?
so I find that values do change. There's some values that change and some that don't. And this is why I like checking in every 3 months, every quarter, because as I'm changing, I'm kind of going up the staircase, if you will. So imagine you're 2 inches tall, you've got this big staircase in front of you, and you're climbing up, and you can see kind of the three lips of the stairs above you, but you can't see above that. And so as you develop and as you create and as you change and as life happens, I live in Ecuador now, which I never thought I would say. Your values change because you focus more on quality of life. And so I tend to check in all the time with my values. And my recent apprentice, Tristan Holm, is here, who is amazing at working with groups and communities. So, Tristan, I know there's a few folks that are asking about groups. Feel free to throw in your email in there or your website or your Instagram. But it's about checking in continually because you always change, especially if you're focusing on something that's problematic. You move the needle quite quickly, and all of a sudden it's not an issue. And so when we're working with things like daily statement of reality, it's like, well, when do I change that? When it's no longer an issue. It's kind of like if you continually walk into a room and you continually stub your toe on a piece of furniture because it's in the direct desire line of how you move up the stairs, you move that piece of furniture 2 inches, which is very similar to how we work with decisions because we work on them and eventually they become a non-issue. We're able to move around it. And then it's like, okay, what's next? What's the next thing I'm working on? So decisions change and values change over time because circumstances change. That was a precognition moment to whoever said that.
nice. Here's a question from Marta. I wonder if this is about the core course or Javan's decision-making course. Is the live course in person or facilitated online with a cohort of others? I believe this is about water stories. So Zach, I mean, I can answer that. So the live course is you're in an online group, you're in a cohort with others, and you do have the option to come to live trainings like the intensive in Oregon. And so there's moments that you can come and learn in person with a group with Zach and others. So it's kind of this combination where like, yes, you're going to learn from an online cohort, and you have the option of coming a workshop or an intensive to learn with Zach and other water cycle restoration practitioners.
And just to add a little detail there, the in-person intensives are only available to people who have already done the course, which enables us to just hit the ground running, which is really super because everyone's operating from the same perspective and understanding. Um, a question from our friend Richard Kuhnhill. What are some good resources for working with groups and how to do
Mm.
value-based decision making with groups? I know you mentioned um, your apprentice in the chat was going to drop some stuff, but maybe you could elaborate on that a bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the great thing about this work is that it can be applied to anyone. And with groups in particular, and specifically intentional communities. If anyone's ever interacted with intentional communities or been part of an intentional community, they're not always on the same page. They're not always aware of their values collectively. And because of that, they don't always advertise correctly and share what they're offering. And so people come and they don't quite know what that is. So generally, when working with groups, it's important to go slow. It's important to interact with folks and say, we're going to start to explore what our common values might be around this business, around this group. I usually work with 2 or 3 businesses a year. I am almost always asked to sign an NDA, which is kind of fun. But with those groups, especially with business groups, there's always personalities. And so being conscientious about what is held commonly and what isn't. And then we do this process within groups, which is super useful. It's useful for individuals as well, but it's called a spot check. And once you have your values, you can quickly run down your values in like 5 or 10 minutes once you get used to it. And you basically say, is this true or not right now? And again, ruthless clarity of vision, if either it's true or it's not. And what's amazing, if you do that as a group, the commonalities of what's not true within a group really showcases where the team or the group or the community as a whole has a weak link, has a misstep. And that can become such a great tool for communities to address the major issue in front of them instead of constantly trying to find an issue, which happens a lot with groups. So generally, making sure everybody can come together, making sure everybody's heard, making sure you have a common conversation that everyone can hold together. And then spot checks is a great tool. But I know Tristan just put down his email. Also, Tristan, if you wouldn't mind, put down your Instagram. Tristan's got some great content coming out of his Instagram right now for groups.
Super. We've got a question from Jenny. And folks, if you want to ask your question with your voice too, feel free to use the raise hand function and we can ask you to unmute and ask your question. Would you mind explaining the subparts of the filtering questions, as in adding verbs to the sections, as in, does this align with my root cause, addressing a weak link, getting me into the right direction, etc.?
Yeah, sure. I'll also say that after 10 years of saying I would do it, I finally wrote my first draft of the values-based decision-making book this year with the help of Tristan. So that is in the future. I'm not saying when, but it's in the future. So Jenny, great, excellent question. Just in short form, because it's a whole conversation, but the questions we asked in these different filtering questions. So one is, does this decision address the root cause of the problem it seeks to address? For weak links, it's, does this decision address an existing social, financial, or ecological weak link, or will it create? And especially when we're working in pest management, in homesteads and grazing operations, this is used really acutely to talk about, okay, are we working with a flea or are we working with a beetle where we're going to interrupt that organism's weakest life cycle? Are we working on the weakest life cycle of that organism, which is an incredible way of looking at it. As we go down and we start to see the other questions, in terms of resource, pardon me, I'm just going to pull them up here. Right direction. So does this decision move me, and how far does it move me towards my right direction? And this was a big one for Raleigh as well, because looking at his numbers, if I only get X amount, I move like 30, 40% there. But if I get the full amount, I'm all the way there. So that just directed him to say, if I do take this on, I need to put all of my efforts behind the marketing to make it a success. Gross profit is, if I'm taking a look at 2 different enterprises, which one moves me forward? And as Zach alluded to, and what he failed to say is that I was working with him on the documentary that I told him he should stop paying me for so he could create this online education. I pop a lot of bubbles, myself included. But looking at what he was doing, he was like, well, I'm going to make this documentary. And if somebody does a project, they'll be able to screen the workshop. And then I was like, cool, how will they get the education? They'll get it from seeing the movie that they need before. Like, there was issues with sequencing. And that's what the gross profit analysis is. It's like, cool, if I've got this limited amount of time in my life, put all my effort into educating people or just telling them about this beautiful thing that's non-interactive, maybe this is the shift that's more important. Energy source and use, where does the energy to make this decision come from? And what is it going to in all things? There's a wonderful example from Alan Savory years ago where he was running a game preserve and they had these 2 options to fill in the potholes coming into the reserve. They could either hire a company that was far away, bring in machines, have it done in a day or 2, or they could pay locals. And they could use sunlight energy through the food that they ate. They could make relationships with what's the locals around them, and then they could fill it in over 3 weeks. But now these people would have a connection to the game preserve. And sure enough, that idea of where does the energy go to switched the conversation completely for them. Finally, future indicators. So this idea of indicators, how do we know we'll get there? What are the subtle and the not so subtle positive and negative indicators that will allow me to know that this implementation I'm doing actually is moving the needle? So I was just talking with a buddy of mine, Neil Bertrando, who runs RT Permaculture, amazing designer and educator. He taught the low tech erosion control course with Jeffrey Adams on regenerative living. And we were talking about this because when you're doing things like one rock dams, when you're doing like leaky weirs, jackfall, etc., you look for subtle indicators to see that sedimentation is happening. We're actually seeing vegetation, deposition happening. Those are all little indicators that we need to understand. So for that decision, if we take it on, what's the subtle, the not so subtle, the positive and the negative indicators? And finally, gut check. How do I feel about this? And Zach's 180 of like, I'm so for this at the end. I'm like, this is dumb. I'm not doing this. That gut check is so important because, again, logic lubricates emotions, and emotions lubricate logic. So we need both of them working together. But that's the short summary.
Nice. I see two questions about basically Javin, your course format. First is from Marius. Thanks a lot for the insightful presentation. If a person enters Javin's course, how long do we have access to it?
Great question. So all courses, you have a full year access to it, and you can come back and work with it as much as you like.
Awesome. So here's a question from Julian, who's also an awesome part of Water Stories. We had a webinar with him about Team Wasserretention. Julian's question is, do you offer frequent office hours like we had in the core course? To me, that was one of the best experiences of the course. So inspiring, mind-blowing, and deep and fast. So seeing if you do live office hours as part of your program.
Absolutely. So with that group program that's coming up, we have office hours after we're doing all the content pieces, and we have that for a year with everybody involved.
Cool. All right, here we go. I like this one from Natalie. There's a there's a good question from Anna in the chat. Can you offer some bubble popping prompt questions for decision making?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you some of my doozies. Does this decision have to be made? This is one of those that like comes right to the heart of it. Like you become obsessed with something and all of a sudden you're like, do I need to make this decision? Is this the decision that is necessary? The other one, which is the very first one, is does this actually address the root cause of what it's trying to address? Or am I just focusing on symptoms, which happens so much with the people I work with? They're like, well, I'm going to focus on my work. It's like, cool. What's the problem with your work? Well, I don't like it. It doesn't make enough money, yada, yada, yada. So I kind of want to make it easier to do. That doesn't focus on the problem that you dislike your work. That just makes it easier to swallow the spoonful of medicine. That doesn't help the conversation. So that can be a great one. The other idea of weak link is really important. It's like, I asked Zach when we were doing our decision test, I'm like, what's the weakest link right now in your life? And the decision didn't address his weak link at all and didn't move him towards what he wanted. So if a decision doesn't address a weak link and it doesn't move you forward, why are you asking it? Which has a whole other series of questions talking about who you are as a person, the parts of you that are alive, which I go into in voice dialogue. The other one I like is, and we use this sometimes in voice dialogue, the Romans did this, specifically the Spartans, called the upside of down or the downside of up. So if this feels like a great decision, what's the worst downside of this? And if that occurs, even if it's a small percentage of possibility or probability, is it worth it? Is it worth it to like gamble on this decision if there might be a problem with it? Down in Ecuador, we've been having a massive drought. And because the last government invested heavily in hydroelectric, 70% of the electricity generated in Ecuador is through hydroelectric. And we were going on 7 months of drought. We were down some days to 2 hours of power a day or no power a day. So when you take a look at the decisions in terms of framework, the downside of up or the upside of down of making your electricity on a countrywide scale 70% reliant on rainfall, when rainfall is variable. And generally, even 10 years ago, rainfall was being concentrated because of the energy that's in the atmosphere. Instead of being distributed evenly throughout the year, none of that would have made sense if we just said, well, what's the possible downside? Everyone could be out of power for months on end because droughts happen. And as we take a look at wet to wet and dry to dry cycles, which are 7 years, classically these days, a little bit less reliable, that doesn't make any sense. Also, to not hedge on the fact that rain usually equals clouds, and if we are growing renewable, why isn't the other 50% solar? That also didn't. So upside of down, downside of up, those can be great questions. Great question, Natalie. I like that. I'm going to use that.
Another one. That's rosy. Question from MJ. Could you discuss more of the first question you asked us about guarding our dreams? You asked us to put our responses in the chat.
Yeah. So that was me in a very direct, less roundabout way saying, do you actively guard your dreams, your intentions, your attention? Because everyone is interested in our attention through our phones, through our daily lives, through our media. That was me actively asking the core question that I think could bring people to values-based decision making or something like it. I'm not sold on everybody doing this work at all. Like you have to make sure it's a good fit. But the main point there was being conscientious about if you are doing it, and if so, how are you effective within it? Or do you feel like you're effective in like guarding your attention, or are you pulled off your course all the time? So I have a family member who loves being on their phone 24/7, doesn't matter. And they say it's to relax. The problem is that after an hour of scrolling, you have been influenced by so many different aims and intentions that usually, and this was a great study that was done off of the Mythbusters being on your phone aspect. Your memory is 40% less capable after scrolling for an hour on one of the scrolling social media. So you barely remember what you were doing before, if not what you're working on currently. So it's fine to relax. It's fine to have concentrated times. I do it, especially when I'm overwhelmed with the day and I just want to laugh. But know that you're actively etch a sketching your brain. And by the end of it, you're going to have to repurpose yourself. You're going to have to pull yourself back together in what you're doing. So it's a small example of it, but that's what that question was really about. Are you guarding against all of the demands upon your time? Because the more attention you give away, the less you have for yourself.
Yeah. All right. Zach, why don't you ask this when my dog is crunching on a bone?
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any quick suggestions, questions, or point to help in getting clear about the vision? I can definitely get caught in the pattern. Can definitely get caught in the pattern and living other people's visions and having a hard time breaking that pattern.
Here, here. Yeah, I was like that for a long time. I thought I had to do a certain thing. And for a long time, that was regenerative land design in the way that I was doing it. I had to be very conscientious doing the way that worked for me. I was juggling like 7 projects at a time. Zach and I talked a lot about this, like one project's in this stage and one project's in this stage. And I don't really know where I am, but these projects are moving along. Yeah, so my approach with this is just to being very clear and to practice envisioning, to practice what the future looks like. We're really good at trying to re-envision the past, but the past is done. It's like trying to mix an egg into cured concrete. That's the image I get to help dispel myself and be like, well, if I had only done this, or if I had only done that, if we all only bought Bitcoin when it was a penny, those ridiculous conversations that can take us away. So my approach is to constantly practice envisioning who I'm going to be in the future, what my next step is, and to come back to it often. And Envision, I think, is like $50 or something. And it's my best foot forward in terms of that envisionment process that I've been doing for now almost a decade. So I would suggest checking that out. And if that you don't want to do that, you just want to do it yourself at home, just practice that envisionment process. Spend some time, calm the mind. However you do it, if you're part of the water stories, Zach has that beautiful monkey mind calming process. Because I practice Vipassana, I use Anapana, which is focusing on this little area around the nose. calm that out, and then in that state go, okay, what's the future look like today? What's what's important to me today? What's important to me for this day, for next day, for the week, for the month, for the year? And I've been doing this because I'm trying to break a habit of taking a look at the news the moment I wake up. And so I've got a little journal just like this on my bedside table. And I write morning pages on my side so that way I can just like empty my brain out and I reconnect with all the things that are important to me. So every year, my family has a tradition, depending on what we're focusing on, we have a single word that kind of encompasses all of our values. Mine's discipline because of my health concerns. And I write that every morning. And that helps me to envision what I need to do that day. So if it's on a workout day and I write discipline, I'm like, okay, I can't spend too much time in bed doing morning pages as much as I like it. I have to go move heavy things. So I go do that. Or I empty out the brain of what was yesterday so that way I can be focused on what's important today. And that's really important as well, I found with journaling, especially in the morning, because I think about, oh, I was obsessed about that yesterday. That didn't move me anywhere closer to what I'm focusing on. Why am I focused on that? And that's where things like interpersonal resistance and voice dialogue come in, where I can be aware of like, oh, a part of me is really concerned what that person might think if I don't get back to them in 24 hours. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. Because what I'm focusing on is building this business, doing this project, being with my family, spending more time with my partner, spending more time with them. That's what's important. So those are some of the things you can do just on a daily basis, and highly recommend checking out Envision. Lots of people have taken it and really enjoyed the process.
Nice. Well, everybody, if there's your last opportunity, if you want to ask a question live, raise that hand. Otherwise, we have one question left in our session today. Wait a second if anybody wants to raise their hand. But in the meantime, here's a question from a Water Stories guest. With 25, so this is a scenario question. So I've got 25 acres of off-grid homestead. I'm feeling stuck in a DIY, time-consuming spiral. My area is a difficult place to get good help, especially contractors. So I spend immense amounts of time doing things myself, much more slowly than an expert where this has taught me to teach myself a lot, but it also gets frustrating about things I'm not very good at all the time. How do you advise making better outsourcing decisions?
Oh, that's a great question. I had these clients a couple years ago, and their design and implementation of their homestead was slow. They were on the slow train, like most people are, and they were both intellectuals. One had started a medical company, one was teaching at a university level, and they needed some actionable values to stay focused on the homestead because they liked the new. They were very excited about the new project. And so they had a value which became stock and standard to anybody I worked with, which was we complete projects before we start new ones. And we focus on the projects that cover the basics. So they had these two values. So the next time a family member came by, and it was usually her parents, I think, they would be like, what's new? Let's work on the new project. And they were like, no, we've been working with this guy, Javin. We've got these values. We finish projects before we start new ones. So you can help us with the goat barn and the fencing, or you can watch us drinking coffee inside, which for their parents was a little bit of a like, come on. And sure enough, they finished it because everybody was pulling towards the same place. Again, those four horses, it's such a great image of like everyone pulling towards. And what they ended up doing is developing, creating, finishing what they were doing, and then they were ready for the next one. So that was a great piece. And the other thing, and similar to yours, this was the buildup to answering your question, was they like to do a lot of things themselves. And so they had a value of, we value people's time and experience. And I used to have a value of barroom advice for a barroom price to remind me that free advice is usually worth what it costs. And hiring Zach to take a look at your pond, hiring Raleigh to take a look at your soil, hiring me to look at your landscape, there comes a value of that. And so my approach was, and I did the same at my homestead. It was like, I looked at the amount of time it would take me to do something. I looked at what I would learn. Same thing I do with business. If I earn or learn, same thing with what I'm doing. And if I can learn something and it doesn't take too much time or effort, and my thing was, am I exhausted thinking about the work it'll take me? That was my heuristic. So I had this little value. If I'm exhausted thinking about the amount of work it's going to take me, I hire somebody. So we had a major water leak, and it had to do with the fact that It was a galvanized steel elbow underneath the house. It broke in November, and our gravity fed well did not have a shut off. Because why would you put a shut off for water? You never need to turn it off. And so the basement flooded. We had to bring in the neighbor. We dug down. We found the pipe. We locked it off. We brought out all the soil. There was a major flood in Canada, and the city of Vancouver, one of the largest cities in Canada, was totally cut off from the rest of the country because of landslide. And we weren't able to get back to take care of this. That pile got wet. It all went down into the ground and became a reverse conducting coolth column that then froze the pipe all the way down after we fixed it. That meant we had an entire winter without water. Had we taken the time just to be like, let's get a plumber in here, let's get an excavator in here, let's fix this right away, we would have been fine. And I can tell you, thinking about it and doing the work was exhausting. And that's where I made the heuristic. I was like, if this exhausts me thinking about it, I hire somebody, just flat out. So that was the process there. Is there an Envision course anytime soon? Yeah, sorry, everybody. There were some issues with that Envision course. There will not be another Envision course until next December, but the replay is there right now. So you can go right into it. Is there a replay of the gentle art? There is, but we have a brand new one coming up in February. So you could look at the replay, or you could be with us live during the course. Folks, I just want to say thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to talk to all of you. I really appreciate all your questions. They were great. If I can help you in any way, shape, or form, feel free to reach out. If you'd like to work with me, feel free to send me an email at javin@allpointsdesign.ca or sign up for the newsletter. And I just want to say a big thanks to Zach and Raleigh. They've been friends, they've been colleagues, they've been clients. It's been a huge pleasure to work with them both, see them both grow in their own ways. And I just love what they do. I stepped into the Water Stories course this last year because I was really keen to see what my offhanded comment that got me fired from the documentary what created. And even though Zach and I met 14 years ago, when originally Sepulcher came over and I went over to Austria to work with Zach and Sepp and see the Chromaterhof and see the Holzerhof, the amount that Zach has put into Water Stories, specifically for folks who want to learn about water storage, water capture, learn it from a lived experience, is one of a kind. There is no other course out there right now that does what Zach's does and does it so exceptionally. So my hat, as always, and always will be, is off to both of you and to everybody who's joined. Thank you so much, gents. I really appreciate you hosting me and inviting me.